What about you, sir? Do you think the colored students will show up?
If I got anything to do with it, they won't show up.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This afternoon, following a series of threats and defiance.
Segregation forever.
The presence of Alabama National Guardsmen was required on the University of Alabama to carry out the final and unequivocal order of the United States District Court. That order called for the admission of two clearly qualified young Alabama residents who happened to have been born Negro.
There are a lot of ways to think of JFK. Leader of the free world, the man that took the world to the brink of nuclear destruction, a very hands-on supporter of women, and the man that put the nail in the coffin of segregation. Today, we're going to focus on the civil rights part of JFK's legacy. JFK comes into the civil rights story in 1961 after narrowly winning the 1960 election. He runs on a platform that supports civil rights, and outrageously, he gets 70% of the black vote, which is unusual because the Democrats historically are the reason why things have been so bad for African Americans in the South. And so the Democrats were going through the Great Shift, which meant that their policies were softening to non-white voters. But you have to remember that at this point, Democrats involved people like this and people like this, which is going to become important later. But JFK's main focus on coming into the White House wasn't civil rights. It was the Cold War, and the Cold War was heating up.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
That absolutely has to be one of the most overused puns about the Cold War. But in this case, it was reality. JFK had been handed a failed invasion of Cuba. The Bay of Pigs invasion was supposed to see a bunch of Cuban nationals retake Cuba and start a counter-revolution against the communist government. But leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis. If we look at Kennedy's early interventions in civil rights, it doesn't appear that he's overly concerned with black protesters. A lot of what he does is the same as what his predecessor did, and a lot of the times he doesn't get directly involved. He sends his brother, Bobby Sox, or Robert Kennedy, to resolve the issues. But this is very far from the truth of what was really happening. As I said before, the Democrats were split at this point, with half of the party being absurdly racist and the other half being progressive. And so to keep JFK's image from being too supportive of civil rights and losing support of his party, his brother would go and act in his place. Unlike his predecessor Eisenhower, Kennedy felt that civil rights was a moral issue and that it needed to be resolved not just because of constitutionality or legal precedent, but because it was the right thing to do. And although it didn't seem like there was a lot of movement from the president himself, he didn't have the popularity that Eisenhower had to just force things through. But unlike Eisenhower, he didn't believe you should be timetabling another man's freedom. So JFK is fighting the Cold War, he's got a fractured party, and he wants to make things better for African Americans. But he wasn't going to be able to rely on his party for support. Most of JFK's early interventions were kind of like Eisenhower's. You federalize the National Guard, suppress the protesters, and then you talk to the governor, tell him he's being a dickhead, tell him to pull his head in. But this is going to change, and it's all going to change because of one man, really. The Commissioner for Public Health and Safety, Bull Connor in Birmingham. And if you want to see a video about that, it's up over here. Bull Connor's reaction to the civil rights protesters was so extreme. It was across every newspaper, children being attacked by dogs, you know, the classics of white supremacist sort of suppression. And it gave JFK the excuse that he needed, really, to just push through the civil rights bill. And because of the extreme violence, JFK could actually justify that this was good for the Cold War, because the Soviet Union was broadcasting all of these images and all these newsreels of black protesters being attacked with fire hoses and dogs and all of that stuff that you don't want seen. JFK stops cheating on his wife long enough to write the civil rights bill. The public is behind him, but we still have the problem of Dixiecrats, one of the more racist governors in the US, George Wallace, video about him here, he's in the same political party as JFK. They're both Democrats. Just like politics today, politicians have all got their hand out for something. And so JFK, to pass this, to get a filibuster-proof majority, he was going to need 2/3 of the Senate to vote on it. And he wasn't going to be able to get those numbers because of the Dixiecrats. In an unprecedented move that no one really saw coming.
A dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet. A nation mourns, the world grieves.
JFK is assassinated. And LBJ takes over from here. And that's who we're going to be talking about next. But suffice to say that if it wasn't for JFK doing the initial part of this, LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, was not really going to have enough to work off of. But LBJ uses the momentum behind JFK's death to get this thing passed. And it's not watered down, it's just put through. Alright, well, that's all I have for you guys today. So, I kind of missed the bit where I talk about why this is a big deal. And this is a big deal because it ends any sort of legal protections for any kind of segregation, which is huge because that didn't exist. This had been an ongoing battle for, you know, since Plessy versus Ferguson, which I think was 100 years. Before the 1963 Civil Rights Bill, that this has become, this is the battleground. And this is he places the nail, he doesn't quite get to hit it on the head because that's what LBJ has to do later, but this is the end of this chapter of racism in society in the US and the start of the next fight, right? And it changes, everything changes after this. So this is a really big deal, but it's also a big deal because JFK was a very moral man. I mean, obviously, apart from listening to his wedding vows, but he thought you had to do the right thing regardless of what it might cost you. And that's why ultimately he was going to do this, whether or not he lived or died. The Civil Rights Bill was going to get passed, but it was just how much of a compromise he was going to have to put into it. And because he dies, it doesn't get any compromises at all. So it's a huge deal. And it also kind of locks in the Democrats into being the progressive leftist party. But yeah, now we can end the video. Thank you for watching. Very much appreciated it. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if you liked it, hit the like, hit the subscribe, chuck us a message, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.